Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
Actually, Mr. Mora, we are talking about playoffs. It's in the title of the damn show. Good evening. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
And I'm Anthony Strait.
Welcome to the playoffs edition of On the Sports Lines. And before we get to the playoffs, we have to wish a very happy birthday to very young 38-year-old Anthony Strait. He posted it on Facebook, so it qualifies as an official number. Anthony, welcome to the world of 38.
Oh, thank you so much. Hey, look, I am 38, but I still look like I'm in my 20s, so I am very blessed right now.
You look like in your 20s, and at times you feel like you're in your 40s. But
I feel like I'm in my 50s sometimes. Okay, I have enough water in my knees that can restock the East River for about a year. So I like to lean on my appearance as much as possible.
Oh. Anyway, Anthony, let's hope everything stays as good as well as we celebrate the last few hours of your birthday doing what we do best, podcasting. Welcome, everyone, to the second season of the NBA and NHL. Now, you know, we shall talk about these three locals that made it to the playoffs in late May in just a moment. But first, we shall talk about a team that did not qualify in the quest for Lord Stanley's chalice. You get one, Jay. You get one.
You took it. Contractual obligation fulfilled.
We're good. The New York Rangers, currently holding the title for most dysfunctional team in New York, held even the Liberty are least less dysfunctional right now, fired coach David Quinn last Wednesday after a terrible, horrible 96, 87, and 25 record in 3 seasons with the Blue Shirts. Terrible. The team has said that they want to pick an experienced replacement, and by God, we are not advisors to Glenn Sather and Mr. Dolan, and God help me if I ever worked for Mr. Dolan, so that's why we're here tonight. Anthony, who should be this team's leader in 21-22?
Oh, wow. You know what? I was kind of torn because I looked at the coaching candidates, and there were two names that actually stuck to mind, too, that came to mind. One is somebody that's actually on the bench right now, as we speak, Lane Lambert. He's a assistant coach to the Islanders. He's been Barry Trotz's right-hand man for the last 3-4 years. He was with the team when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup in 2017, 2018, and was a big part of kind of that turnaround of turning the Capitals into more of a physical team that was more defensive-minded. Barry Trotz obviously brought him over to the Islanders, and obviously you see the Islanders' mentality of toughness and being physical and being defensive-minded. And I think with David Quinn being fired, that was part of the criticism. You understand? The Rangers being one of the youngest teams in hockey, and the whole situation with the game against the Bruins and everything that was going on. The Rangers seem like they're a team that maybe I hate to say it, soft. To put the long story short, so you don't have to go too far in the toughest department. But another guy that came to mind that was on this list was Patrick Waugh, and we all know him as the legendary goalie for the Canadiens and the Colorado Avalanche. But he coached the Avalanche for 3 years, and his first season was actually successful. Led them to the best record in the Western Conference. The last 2 years, not so well. He actually resigned after his third season because he didn't have much control over player personnel, and went down to the minor leagues, the Quebec Ramparts, as a general manager. But he's expressed interest in coming back to hockey. Those are two guys that kind of stood out to me because one right now, I think what Dolan is looking for, and also general manager Chris Drury, is a coach that, he got a young team, the talent is there. And obviously, you got plenty of skilled players, but the Rangers may be lacking some toughness, defensive-minded players. And one of the criticisms about David Quinn and the Rangers as a whole was you had great goaltending and a lot of offense, but the Rangers were not good defensively the last few seasons, and it showed, particularly in the qualifiers last year against Carolina and many times this year in that stacked Eastern Division. So those are two guys that maybe it could be a good consideration. It would be kind of a little outside the box in a way, because both of these guys lack head coaching experience. But you know what? When you have a young team that's inexperienced itself, and there's always the Dolan factor as far as, okay, does he want to be an instant contender or keep the progression of the rebuild going, but still try to be competitive enough to make the playoffs? Like I said, it's these two guys stood out to me on that coaching list.
Wall would have been a very good choice, by the way. I was originally going to think of him, but I feel like he hasn't had any real time in the major league level as of late. And I think that may be one of the reasons why they're going to go with a more experienced head coach. Jay?
Honestly, guys, I have no clue how this is going to play out. I think it'll very much depend on how much autonomy Chris Drury will be given to hire his choice, or if he'll be forced to hire James Dolan's choice, possibly after chief hockey advisor Glenn Sather whispers the name in Dolan's ears, even if it's the wrong choice for a still rebuilding Ranger team. Either way, this is a job that's going to have guys lining up around MSG, even though it does come with the adjunct of dealing with Dolan and his temper tantrum and shenanigans. I'm sure the list that will get thrown around will include the likes of Patrick Waugh, as Anthony mentioned. Waugh actually won a Stanley Cup with Drury when they were teammates in Colorado. And as Anthony said, he did coach the Avs. Other guy names that you're probably going to hear: Mike Babcock, Rick Tocchet, Bruce Boudreau, Bob Hartley. But another name's getting tossed around, and it kind of intrigues me, and that's John Tortorella, who has already had 2 stints with the Rangers. And if he's hired for a 3rd time, he'd be approaching Billy Martin status. That up, y'all, if you're too young to know what that means. And before you dismiss this out of hand, hear me out. Torts has a great relationship with Drury, who was his captain as a Ranger, as well as Artemi Panarin from their time together in Columbus. And here's something else. The last time Torts coached the Rangers, they were a young team like they are now, on the rise, and actually arrived a year early in 2011-12, nearly winning the President's Trophy and reaching the Eastern Conference Finals. The team that Alain Vigneault took to the Stanley Cup Finals in 2014 was largely made up of players that Tortorella coached previously. And here's another something else to chew on. Sather loved Tortorella when he was here, and it seemed like Dolan did too, until the players turned on Torts in their exit interviews after the 2013 season. There's a lot of people who think Tortorella would be good for the young talent that constitutes a large part of the Rangers roster. Guys like Adam Fox, Keandre Miller, Ryan Lindgren, Alexis Lafreniere, and Morgan Barron. He has the track record. He's won a Stanley Cup and has shown he can handle the pressure of coaching in New York and dealing with an owner like Dolan. He'd check a lot of boxes. Probably won't happen, but with Dolan, who knows?
The problem with Tortorella is very simple. You need someone to be a build type coach, and he is break. He loves confrontation. And I know you might get that edge out of Tortorella, but I think you need somebody who's more of a steady hand, who's dealt with players before, and he doesn't really give the edge to the New York Rangers. But Gerard Gallant is definitely my choice for this pick, because he's also the betting favorite of Vegas, shockingly enough. But I think he is a guy who believes in up-tempo, puck pursuit, puck pressure hockey. He coached the Florida Panthers in 2016, and he had a ton of young talent. And as you can see, they're in the Stanley Cup playoffs again and were a division winner this year. But then obviously, as Anthony may know, he went to Vegas and got the team to the Stanley Cup in its first season in 2017-18. Got fired 2 years later because head coaching is definitely a slippery slope, because Vegas demanded success, and then Peter DeBoer came and they almost got to the Stanley Cup next year. So Gallant has built winners, and he doesn't have a long reputation in places. He only got fired 3 years after 3 years in Columbus. He is a no-nonsense guy, which helps out a lot. He commands respect, but again, he's low-key and shuns the spotlight. And if you're going to have Dolan have more of a say in this, that might not be the right choice, but I think it should be the right choice. He coaches prospects. He will cut them a little slack at times. But I think out of the group of people that are there, I think he's the best. There's a lot of other good choices in there. Rick Tocchet just got fired from Arizona, built a damn good team there. Claude Julien is a cup winner. Mike Babcock is a Cup winner, currently doing stuff on NBC, as actually tonight. Bruce Boudreau has been somebody who has been on the block before. So there's many different ways that the Rangers could go here. I think they should play it safe, but it's Dolan. No one expects the Rangers to play it safe after the moves that they had already made. All right. So, guys, for the first time in 8 years, I'm not ashamed to say, go New York, go New York, go! New York Knicks are finally starting their playoff run on Sunday as the 4 seed against the Atlanta Hawks, who themselves have been through a nice 4-year rebuild. The two teams share a 41-31 record, the same underdog status, and are led by marvelous head coaches, but only the Knicks have 3 players who are finalists for awards, as revealed tonight, with Tom Thibodeau for head coach of the year, Julius Randle for most improved player, and Derrick Rose for 6th man of the year. Let's start that campaign. No one was talking about that. So let's preview this intriguing series, shall we? Anthony, start watching. It begins with the Knicks MVP in 2021 and the best season the Knicks has had for years, Julius Randle.
Yeah, by the way, before I begin, congratulations for the Knicks selling out their reduced capacity seats. 15,000 between games 1 and 2. So the Garden is going to be really loud come Sunday night for that first game. But yeah, starter watch is the obvious one, as Julius Randle has a fire engine going behind me while I'm speaking.
That's because you have such a hot take there, buddy.
It's my blazing top something. I don't know. Colin Cowherd makes it work. I can't. But anyway, Julius Randle, he's the obvious one. He's got his numbers: 24 points per game, close to 6 assists. His usage is tops in the league at 28.3%. But as he goes, so does the Knicks offense. And with him in the court, the Knicks offense is 110.1. and it dips down to 106 without him. Now, here's the thing, with Julius Randle being his best season, being an all-star, and with the numbers he puts up, that also brings attention, which in the forms of double teams and teams actually planning defensively against you. Now, because it's a playoff series, it's duly noted that a lot of the games this season were back-to-back, kind of mini series, where you play the team consecutive games in a row. And in the Knicks case, they had 3 teams in that little series: the Bulls, the Wizards, and the Heat. Now, in the first game, Julius Randle scored 28.7 points per game and almost 10 rebounds in that first leg of that doubleheader. The second leg of the doubleheader where the problem lies, and it drops down to 17 a game, and his rebounds dropped to under 8 per game. Obviously, when he's getting on, he's going to command a lot of double teams, and he has struggled with double teams, especially in the post. His post for possession in the post is 1.4, with a 10.1 percentage of the possessions result in turnovers. And obviously, we've seen late in the year when teams like Charlotte and Boston play zone, Julius Randle really does struggle in the paint. So, as Rabbi reacts to what's going on in the TV just as much as I'm trying not to. Julius Randle is a big part, because if he's clicking, especially against Atlanta, where he has scored 37, he's averaged 37 a game in the 3 meetings against Atlanta this season. If he's on, the Knicks are going to really run away with this series early. But if he starts to struggle and no one else is able to pick up the offensive slack, with Atlanta's offensive firepower, it could be a really tough series for the Knicks, even with the home court advantage. So Julius Randle has got to be the all-star that he is. He's got to be the guy that kind of literally take his game to the next level if the Knicks want to advance.
By the way, disclaimer, that was not for the Islanders. We'll get to what that is in a second. X Factor is mine, and I'm going to go with Alec Burke. Now, it's very interesting to see one of this. I'm going to actually tie this in. Who's going to play the point guard on this team to start? I'm very curious. There is no real starter, because Derrick Rose, 6th man of the year nominee, is kind of been a key with the bench and working well with Quigley. And I don't think Tibbs wants to do anything to really ruin that.
No.
We haven't really seen too much out of Elfrid Payton. He's the only player in the current rotation with a negative net rating. So how about Alec Burke at point guard? He's played point guard in small doses over his 10-year career, but he's closed out a few games this season in what is, I think, one of their best lineups: Randall, Barrett, Noel, and Bullock as the Suedo point guard, and he looks good with starters, and he looks good with the bench. Burks has averaged 41.5 from deep. You have some good perimeter shooting. You have some good offense in the backcourt, and he also has size. He can block. I think everybody on this team needs to block. It is a prerequisite to be part of the team of Thibs. So I would say he just last week went for 30 against the Spurs in 3 must-win games that the Knicks needed. So Burks is going to be a very key part of this rotation. I'm very curious to see what this rotation actually is in the postseason, because right now Tibbs has I wouldn't say an embarrassment of riches, but an embarrassment of options that he could go to. He just needs to get the right group of people there. But they've gone so many ways in this 3 games against the Hawks this year, and have scored over 110 or 107 in all 3 of them, which is why the Knicks have a good shot and are favored to win the series. So let's talk about conspiracy theorist Nate McMillan and the Atlanta Hawks and talk about how their game plan will be, Jay.
Rabbi, before I jump into that, as someone who watched Alec Burks a lot last year when he was with Philly and saw lineups where he was bench lineups where he was a primary ball handler, it's not something you want to do for extended stretches. Just
let me before you go on to that, let me counter that. In the Philadelphia, nobody in that Philadelphia team was ready to be a ball handler in any way, shape, or form. There's been a big growth of Burks throughout the year, I think, and obviously the Simmons injury hurt, but that Philly team was a runaway train waiting to run into a wall in Orlando. So I almost have to throw that out. You can take the 2 years in Utah that he had as more of a better example. He had a lot of good pluses on that run. He had a +7, a +13, and +17 in the first series against OKC. Didn't do as well against Houston, but no one did that year. So I kind of take that with a grain of salt. Now go ahead with Atlanta, sir.
All I'm saying, Rabbi, is Burks is very much a shoot first guy.
He is.
And that's not the kind of guy you want to put in that position.
He is, absolutely.
And honestly, I think taking him off the bench and making him a nominal starter or whatever you want to do is probably not something you're going to see Tibbs do. But like you said, he's got a lot of options.
It's a hard decision, Jay. It's a hard decision, but I think it's obviously still nominal starter in the word. It's really what can you get in the 5 to 7 minutes before Derrick Rose comes in the lineup, and that's really what we're asking for here.
We'll see how it shakes out. The Hawks.
Yes.
Look, we all know what Trae Young is going to bring to this series. He's good for 25 points and 9 assists every night, almost 9 trips to the charity stripe. He's going to take the bulk of the shots, be the highest usage player in the series, over 33%. And the guy first up in the Knicks defensive game plan. What I'm going to be watching with this team and with him is whether or not his regular season, win-loss splits are going to carry over into the postseason, because there were some serious big swings in his scoring and shooting. In wins, he averaged almost 28 a game on 48% from the floor, 39% from deep, and a 64% true shooting percentage. In losses, those numbers dropped a little under 22 a game on 38% shooting from the floor, a little over 26.5 from beyond the arc, and a 51.7 true shooting percentage. The Knicks did a good job against him in the regular season, making him work for the 24.7 he averaged against them, holding him to just 36.2 from the floor, 21.4 from deep, and a true shooting percentage of 50.7. They did let him get to the line 11 times per game over the 3 games, all of which the Hawks lost, something I'm sure Thibodeau is going to remind his team about. He'll also no doubt remind them that if not for Young rolling his ankle in the 3rd game they played against him, that season series could have easily been 2-1. The big questions for the Hawks is which one of Young's teammates is going to raise their game to take advantage of the looks they should get with the Knicks focused on Young. Bogdan Bogdanović is the first guy I'm looking at. He's really raised his game this year, becoming one of the best 3-point shooters in the league at 44% on 7.6 attempts per game, and has combined with Young to form a dynamic backcourt. He's really benefited from the midseason coaching change that with Lloyd Pierce going out and Nate McMillan coming in. Pierce had him standing in the corner as a spot-up shooter coming off the bench. McMillan has him moving more without the ball, which is his best skill. He's coming off screens. He has the ball in his hands more, and he's shown a nice ability to create both for himself and his teammates. He's averaging 18 a game since the coaching change, and he's turned Atlanta's second unit lineups without Trae Young from the team's biggest liability into a surprising strength. Now, Bogdanović plays the majority of the minutes that Young doesn't, and those units have outscored their opponents by 3.9 points per 100 possessions, with Bogdanović on the court and Young off since the All-Star break. Look at the rest of the guys who surround Young. Clint Capella, still one of the best rim runners, rebounders, front court defenders, and rim protectors in the game. He's a guy you don't have to run plays for. He just does work. 15 points on 59% shooting, 14-plus rebounds a game, tops in the NBA, almost 5 of them on the offensive boards, 2 blocks a game. He and John Collins are going to get the bulk of the Hawks' front court minutes, and Collins will get some, and both of those players are going to get some minutes guarding Julius Randle. Collins was the Hawks' second leading scorer at 17.6 a game in only 29 minutes. Shot 55.6 from the floor, almost a little under 40% from 3, and was the second leading rebounder on the team at 7.4 a game. Biggest questions the Hawks have here with their core players is the health of forward DeAndre Hunter and whether he'll be 100% for the start of this series. He's battled back from a torn meniscus and soreness in that same knee. Cost him 49 games this season. Played 18 of the first 19 games of the season and was scoring the ball at a 17.2 clip on 51+% shooting, 36.6 from deep, 87.7 from the line, as well as providing solid defense, the ability to guard multiple positions. He was able to play 25 minutes in the season finale against Houston, able to get some good run without having to max out his effort on either end of the floor. If Hunter is 100%, and the extra week off will no doubt help with that, then I can see him getting primary defensive responsibility against Randle. Hunter has the agility and quickness to defend guards, the strength and size to match up with big forwards like Randle. Being able to put Hunter on Randle allows the Hawks to keep Capella protecting the rim and put Collins on R.J. Barrett, which is a better matchup for Collins. The big question for the Hawks defensively will be whether or not they can slow down Derrick Rose. Young is abysmal on defense, and Bogdanović isn't much better. These teams are well matched. As Rabbi said, both finished 41 and 31. Knicks were plus 2.4 points per 100 possessions this season. Hawks plus 2.2. Since April 1, Knicks were 17 and 7, 4th best record in the NBA. Hawks were 18 and 7, 2nd best record. Trae Young will no doubt put up numbers, but for the Hawks, this series could turn on which of the secondary or role players raises their game. I think the guy that has to start with is Bogdanović. We'll see.
What's a word that's worse than abysmal for the Hawks defense? Because I think I heard an announcer, a color commentator this year said, does Trae Young try on defense? And the answer is honestly, probably not.
Probably not. When you consider the kind of offensive workload that guy carries, it's not.
He does, but basketball is a two-way game, and that's one of the reasons why a team should feel good about playing the Hawks, especially when Trae Young has to be on the floor for at least 35 to 40 minutes a game.
Well, here you want a different turn of phrase, Rabbi? Here it goes. I'll borrow the one somebody used in a story about Kyrie Irving. He hopes not to get destroyed on defense.
Well, speaking of, let's talk about the team that hopes to not get destroyed on defense, and the Brooklyn Nets. Predicted by me, by the way, at the beginning of the year to be the number 2 seed in the East, and in the regular season, go figure, number 2 seed in the East. Despite only having 9 games together as a family, and that by meaning the big 3 of Durant, Irving, and Harden, and an eye-popping 37 different starting lineups. That's one starting lineup per 2 games, my friends. It is time for the real work to begin for the Queens. I mean, the wannabe Kings of New York. First up, it's the number 7 seeded Boston Celtics. A contender to start, but injuries and mediocrity from everyone not named Tatum or Brown put Celtic pride in the play-in tournament, which they quickly escaped from. I think that's a new horror movie, The Escape from the Play-In Tournament, which with a otherworldly 50-point performance by Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown Gone for the rest of the season. It's gonna be a tough order for Boston in this first round. Let's talk about the star, Anthony.
You know what? I mean, you gotta start with Kyrie Irving. I mean, it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
He's Kyrie Irving without question, and obviously, I made no secret. I've been a big critic of his over the past, but this is his best season by far in his career. He became the 9th player to join the 50-40-90s club, which is shooting over 50%, 40% for 3-pointers, and shooting over 90% in free throws. His numbers respectively 50.6 on field goals, 40.2% on 3-pointers, and 92% from the charity stripe. He's the 9th player to do so. One of the other 8 guys happened to be his teammate in Kevin Durant. So obviously the Nets are not short on firepower. And Kyrie Irving, obviously, we know about his playoff heroics with the Cleveland Cavaliers and Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals. He led the Nets in scoring, 26 points per game. And of the big 3, he's actually played the most games, even though he himself had missed games for a variety of reasons. But obviously, we're not talking about the grand season he's having because of what he said over the weekend. And there's the gift and the curse that comes with Kyrie Irving, because Kyrie Irving is one of the most phenomenal athletes to step on a basketball court. Unfortunately, he's also an enigma, and whether he knows it or doesn't know it, he becomes a distraction, which is always a bad thing when you have him in your locker room. Look, off the court, he's one of the most charitable guys you can ever find as an athlete. Look, and where his focus is, that's one thing. But if you're a Net fan, you probably don't want to hear that before a playoff game. So the thing is with Kyrie Irving is that his last playoff appearance, which coincidentally was with the Boston Celtics in 2019, he didn't play well. He shot under the 40%, had 2 really bad games back-to-back in games 3 or 4 at Milwaukee series, and pretty much throwing a towel in the Game 5 clincher in Milwaukee, where it's literally the first guy to walk off the court before the time expired. And from that was kind of symbolic, because 7 months earlier he had said he wanted to be signed with Boston, and he just couldn't wait to get the heck out of there. So that was the last time he was in the playoffs, and sandwiched in between 2 postseasons between the Nets and Celtics respectively, where he was not even an active participant because of injury. Kyrie Irving has painted a bull sign on his back to some extent because of all between the media. He got fined again earlier this week for not speaking to the media. The things he has said in the past that are somewhat ill-timed, whether you agree with him or not. And you got to understand, if he doesn't play well, if he face plants for the Nets and they're not able to at least get to the conference finals, a lot of the criticism is going to fall on Kyrie Irving, and those pawns he has been so quick to criticize are going to be feasting on him in the offseason. So Kyrie is really, his talent speaks for itself. Unfortunately, his mouth just can't stay shut long enough for us to give him the recognition he deserves as an all-world talent. So Kyrie Irving's really got to step it up, because, like I said, Harden's working his way back. He's more of a distributor. Kevin Durant's going to get his, but Kyrie Irving is really that equalizer, and the guy who really tips the scale in the net, not just on the court, but in the locker room as well. Because if he's engaged, the Nets are unbeatable. But if he's checked out or he's aloof, as he has been. By the way, there's a great article in the New York Post about Kyrie Irving that came out yesterday that was talking to Rabbi about prior to the game. If he drifts off and he's not engaged with the rest of the team, that could be a bit of a problem, and that could trip the Nets up, or be part of the reason why the Nets may not get to the ultimate goal of winning a championship.
I will say this, in the Boston games that he's played this year, he's acted like a man possessed. 37 in the Christmas Day game that they played, in the first game after the second half, a 40 spot. Played terrible in the third game, but beat the Boston Celtics with nobody else. Durant and Harden were both out. So at least for this round, Kyrie knows that he has motivation. And when Kyrie has motivation, he plays even better than I think a top 10 player would. And that's what Kyrie is this year.
And does he play, and we talked about this, does he play, is he just so much better when he's able to go out and just play his game. He doesn't have to worry about.
We talked about this before. He is so
setting up
much
the
better
teammate,
as a number
like that.
one-ish option. He is better as a number 1 or 2 option, even though sometimes he's not the number 1 or 2 option on that team. And that team is still
if
the most
ever
talented
there was
player.
a player in the NBA of that caliber who actually should just shut up and dribble, it's Kyrie. He plays so much better when there's no other, when he's not doing stuff that's distracting off the court.
What's the rule about the facts of life? You take the good, you take the bad. I've learned this season with Kyrie Irving. If you take the bad, you get what you see this year, and that's pretty damn good. Okay, X Factor. Let's talk about Blake Griffin, who ended up as the 7th player on this team to play center this year and played center in the final few games of the year for the Nets. Brought in, obviously, from Detroit midseason as one of those buyout guys. He's done pretty damn good. And really, he's their second best player on defense. Over his 26 games for the Nets, he's averaged 10 points, 4.7 rebounds, and 2.4 assists, and only is on the floor for 21.5 minutes a game. He's shooting almost 50% overall from the field, and they are a plus 130 in his 560 minutes on the floor. So it's really going to be an interesting choice of where they're going to put Blake this postseason, when they're going to go to Blake. Is Blake your finishing 5? I don't know if he is. I think realistically, you're going to probably put Durant as your finishing 5 at certain points just because of the defense that he can give you. I understand that completely, but I think the one thing that Blake gives you is defense. And I think if this team is going to win a title, they're going to need that. They're going to need defense. But Blake is probably one of the most explosive players on this team. Thank God he started dunking, because I was sick and tired of the he hadn't dunked for 2 years stat had he got until he actually came back to this team. He's been a mentor for Nick Claxton, who's going to need to take a step up in this postseason. Again, as we talked about with the Knicks, with Thibodeau and his embarrassment of options, this is an embarrassment of riches for Steve Nash. It's like a puzzle. You have to put the pieces together, and you have to realize who your final 5 are going to be on the floor, especially, no offense to Boston, when you get into matchups with higher scoring and more caliber teams like Philadelphia and Milwaukee, which they're going to do in about 2 weeks if they take care of business here. So the question is very simple. Where does Blake Griffin fit? And if he fits where I think he fits, he might have more of an impact than he had in some of his last seasons in LA. We shall see. Jay, let's talk about the Celtics.
We kind of have to. We are contractually obligated to talk about
They are the opponents. They are on national TV. It's not just the Nets playing himself in an exhibition in the playoffs, although that's what people would like to see.
All right. Boston's reward for beating the Wizards and securing the number 7 seed that they would have had in any other season is a first-round matchup against the popular pick to come out of the East, the Brooklyn Nets, who, with James Harden now healthy and ready to line up alongside Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, will have a fully operational Death Star ready just in time for the postseason. If this was the Celtics team we saw in the bubble in last year's playoffs, the one that has made the Eastern Conference Finals in 3 of the last 4 years, this would have been a must-see series. Sadly, this is not those Celtics. With Jaylen Brown out for the year with a wrist injury and Campbell Walker not quite the Campbell Walker we're used to seeing, not to mention the other injuries that have riddled this team, Robert Williams and Marcus Smart both limped off the court against the Wizards. Williams is day-to-day. Smart is playing through the pain. This team is Jason Tatum and not much else. Tatum, as Rabbi said, dropped 50 on Washington in the 7-8 play-in game and put up 69 points on 27 of 49 shooting from the floor, 55% in Boston's last 2 games against the Nets. He'll likely have to be close to that level offensively every night against Brooklyn for Boston to prevent this series from being over after 4 games. Going up against Durant every night won't make that easy. Walker has only played 43 games this season. He did not play more than 7 games in a row at any point in this season and was inactive for 7 of the last 11 games of the season. He averaged 19.3 points per game, but shot only 42% from the floor and 36% beyond the arc, and saw a big drop-off in his mid-range shooting, which is a big part of his game. He was another player who had a huge difference in his wins versus losses splits. In 22 wins, 20.5 points per game on 46% from the floor, 40% from three, with a 62.5 true shooting percentage and a plus 15 net rating. In 21 losses, 18 points per game on only 38% field goal shooting, 31.4 from beyond the arc, with a 49.6 true shooting percentage, and a minus 10 net rating. If Celtics fans want to hang their hat on something, Walker did have an excellent month of May, which granted was only 4 of the 8 games, where he only played 4 of the 8 games in the month, but he did average 29.8 points per game on a 50.6% shooting from the floor, 45.9% from three, with a 65.5 true shooting percentage. It was also his highest usage rate month at 30.8%. He dropped 29 in a play-in game over Washington, but only managed 11 in the only game he played against the Nets back in March. The matchup of stars is going to be interesting. Tatum on Durant. But Marcus Smart may not be 100% by the start of the series, and if he's not, he won't be able to share the defensive responsibilities guarding both Irving and Harden for stretches, which may force Brad Stevens to put the likes of Evan Fournier on Harden some of the time and Walker on Irving. That won't work long-term for Boston. Jason Tatum will do his level best, but there's no way to replace the 24.7 points per game and defense that Jaylen Brown gave them, along with everything else he did to stuff the stat sheet as 1B to Tatum's 1A. This is a Celtics team that is a shadow of its former self, and I cannot see any way in which this series is remotely competitive. As much as the Celtics may not have wanted to lose to Washington and be forced to play the Pacers for the right to claim the number 8 seed in the East, a matchup against the top-seeded Sixers might actually have been given them a better chance in the first round. Not by much, mind you. The Sixers are the East number 1 seed for a reason. They're a damn good team. But it would have given them a better chance than they'll have against the aforementioned fully operational Death Star that is the Nets. If this series go more than 5 games, I will be shocked.
I will be too, although just remember the Wizards actually beat the Nets twice in the beginning of the year when they had 2 of the big 3. Yes, no Harden, but this is not a bad. This is going to be interesting. I agree. If this series goes more than 5, I will be very surprised. But I do see some sleepwalking potential here for the Nets. I don't think it's going to be too much sleepwalking, but I can see this going 6, possibly. That's as much of a hedging of a bet as you're going to get. Moving on to the, get ready to salute, general preview of the Eastern Conference. I'm going to get this wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 76ers rode Joel Embiid to a number 1 seed, stopping to count a little bit early. No, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the Bucks took it a little easier this year and is a 3 seed after a couple of years at the top of the heap. And we also have the defending conference champions. A spot worse this year. They're the 6th seed, and then they faced the team that they beat up a year ago, the Bucks in round 1. Jay, you were so excited to talk about Philadelphia in the last segment, you jumped the gun. Let's talk about Philly some more.
Oh, man, really? You're hilarious sometimes, Rabbi. You really are.
That sounded like the worst "you're hilarious sometimes, Rabbi. You really are" ever in the history of that. I take that as an insult, sir. Move on.
Have you met me? How long have you known me? How long?
I know, but I'm just calling you out on it. Now move on.
Yes, sir. All right. We know who the Sixers' first round opponent will be after the Wizards, whom Philly swept 3-0, absolutely obliterated the Pacers to claim the East number 8 seed. But the Sixers would seem to have an easy road to the Eastern Conference Finals if they take care of business against Washington and either the Knicks, who they also swept 3-0, but in very close games, or the Hawks, who they were 2-1 against in the semis. No disrespect to any of these teams, but in my opinion, the Sixers' biggest obstacle to getting to the conference finals is themselves. They've had their struggles this season despite having the East best record. This is a much improved team over the one we saw in the bubble last season, and that team might have gone to the conference finals if Ben Simmons was healthy. New front office boss Daryl Morey has given new bench boss Doc Rivers a solid roster that improved the biggest weakness the team had last year: shooters who could space the floor around MVP candidate Joel Embiid and knock down kick-out passes from Simmons. When the starting lineup was on the floor, the Sixers shot 50.9% on corner threes and 43.7% overall from beyond the arc. Both of those numbers rank in the 98th percentile in efficiency. The additions of Seth Curry, 45% from three, and Danny Green, 40.5% from three, have more than filled the shooter roles around Embiid, Simmons, and Tobias Harris, who's having a great bounce-back season under his old Clippers coach, making Philly's starting five one of the most effective units in the NBA this season, and they have to be because their bench has been as erratic as it is. The starting lineup is plus 16 points per 100 possessions above their opponents per clean in the glass. They were one of 6 teams that had a lineup play 1,000 possessions together, and that plus 16 was by far the best high-minute 5-man lineup in the league. The starting lineup ranked in the top 10% of all lineups in both offense, 93rd percentile, and defense, 97th percentile, and their half-court efficiency, 103 points per 100 plays, with all 5 starters on the floor, ranks in the 92nd percentile. Obviously, even with the improved shooting, the Sixers offense starts and ends with Joel Embiid. Granted, he only played 51 games due to injury and load management, but when he was on the court, he was dominant, 20.5 points per game, 51.3 from the floor, a little under 38% from beyond the arc, a little under 86% on his 10.7 trips to the free throw line. Throw in 10.6 boards, 2.8 assists, 1 steal, and 1.4 blocks, and you have an MVP candidate resume. After his last 2 playoff exits, Embiid talked about the need to diversify his offensive game beyond the low post. He's done that this season, spending a career-high 12.3% of his possessions on isolations, and according to Synergy Sports, he's converting them at a career-high 1.062 points per possession. He's more comfortable than ever facing up farther from the basket and putting the ball on the floor than he's ever been. Along with his record-setting foul drawing, the improved face-up game is the story of his season. Embiid's passing out of double teams has been impressive at times this year. The hockey assists are really get the Sixers offense going at a high level. They score at a ridiculous 119.1 points per 100 possessions when Embiid is on the floor this season, which is a great recipe for success when coupled with the way both he and the team defend. Biggest concern for Philly, no matter who they play, is can this team score enough? Philly's ability to play suffocating D is its strength. Second-ranked defense is superior to their 13th-ranked offense, which can tend to get bogged down, especially when its streaky three-point shooters start missing. Then there's the issue of scoring late in games, and that's been a problem for Philly for years. And it remains to be seen whether this season's team will solve it. They'll need Simmons to play like he did in a 19-game stretch right after James Harden was traded to the Nets. Remember, he was in those discussions, where he averaged 18.5 points, 7.4 assists, shot 62% from the floor, and took close to 6 free throws a game. They'll need Harris to continue with what is likely the best season of his career. He's second on the team at scoring at 19.5 a game. He shoots 51% from the floor, 39% from three, and 89% from the line. Puts up almost 7 boards and 3.5 assists. Rivers' ability to run plays that get Harris switched onto weaker defenders in ISO situations, especially late in games, has given Harris opportunity to showcase his ability to get off his shot, something they'll need in the playoffs when we know games are going to be much tighter. Here's some stats to watch, guys. Sixers at 107 are second only to the Lakers, 106.8 in defensive efficiency this season, and their defense at each position has been stellar. According to ESPN's defensive real plus minus, the Sixers are the only team with a player in the top 10 at every position. Danny Green is third among small forwards, Harris is fourth among power forwards, Embiid is sixth among centers, Simmons is fifth among point guards, and Seth Curry, believe it or not, is eighth among shooting guards. That defense will be what Philly hangs their hat on as they look to make a run to at least the conference finals. They'll also hang their hat on having home court throughout the Eastern Conference playoffs. As we all know, the Sixers are a completely different team when they're outside the friendly confines of the Wells Fargo Arena. 29-7 at home, 20-16 on the road, 117 points per game on offense, 108.5 on defense at Wells Fargo, 109.8 on the road offensively, 107.6 defensively. Every player who was part of that backbreaking Game 7 loss to the Raptors fully believes that if that game had been in Philly, the outcome would have been different. There will be fans in the stands, and this team very much plays off that energy. And they may need it if they wind up in a Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals against that fully operational Death Star called the Brooklyn Nets. That is if they don't shoot themselves in the foot in the first 2 rounds.
Welcome back to Sixers Corner as we continue on today's show. By the way, I agree with everything. 2 things for you, Jay. Number 1, they were really on their way to a conference finals appearance last year. They were a clusterfuck going into the bubble. There was
2 years. Hey, look.
2 years ago, yes, but last year, Brett Brown and all of the spacing issues of this team did not work whatsoever.
No. And Brown freely admitted, and I said this on the show, he struggled figuring out a way to get the offense to work. But it's hard to get that offense to work when your primary ball handler and your primary on-ball defenders are not available to you.
I understand exactly what you...
That made a bad situation that much worse.
I understand what you're exactly saying, but saying if they were a conference finals contender is like saying if the Knicks didn't get into the bubble, they could have easily made it into the NBA championship.
If they had beaten the Celtics, and I think if Simmons had been healthy, that was a possibility. They would have been in the conference finals.
Everything is a possibility. Also, one more thing. I think the road for the Sixers, the Wizards are going to be a tough matchup in round one because it's going to be you score first, you score second, you score third. But getting the Hawks and Knicks in round two.
Up on that backcourt of Westbrook and Beal is going to be a challenge.
But getting the Hawks and Knicks in round two, when you actually get a favorable matchup without tanking, godsend for the 76ers. And I think it'll help. And I'll direct that to
their biggest obstacle is themselves.
Well, I'll tie that in a little bit, but you can't beat the Heat, Anthony, can you?
Well, here's the thing about the Miami Heat. On the other end of that Eastern bracket, they're kind of a wild card. I mean, you think about this, we forget because they got to such a sluggish start. They had the COVID issues, just as so many other teams had around the league. They started out, they were 7-14 at one point. They were really struggling. They had injuries galore. Jimmy Butler missed games. And they were just a mess. And then the month of March came around and they turned it around. They started to become more the team we saw down the Orlando bubble, the team that played hard-nosed defense. They got timely scoring. Tyler Hero remembered who he was before the celebrity kicked in. And certainly they ended the season winning 8 of the last 10 games. It could have easily been the number 4 or 5. I would say they lost a game against their first opponent, the Milwaukee Bucks, last weekend, that kind of flipped the Middle Eastern standards around. But look at the Miami Heat; they're pretty much the same team from a year ago. And the thing is, they remembered who they were from a year ago. You know what you're going to get from Jimmy Butler. You know what you're going to get from Bam Adebayo. But now you have Goran Dragic that's healthy. Tyler Hero is actually back to the guy he was last year, who was one of the unsung heroes, along with Duncan Robinson, that helped Miami basically go on that Cinderella run to an NBA Finals. And I say this every year. We cannot give enough credit to the coaching job that Eric Spoelstra does year after year with the talent he has. Remember, they traded for Victor Oladipo, and that trade has clearly not worked out one iota for the
rest of the playoffs.
Yeah, and the Miami Heat, you know what? They're still going. There's a toughness to this team that reminds me of those. They remind me of the Knicks teams in the 90s. A team that wasn't great offensively, but they were tough defensively. They weren't afraid of any team that they came across, and they weren't afraid to get scrappy. And now they get a Milwaukee Bucks team that is literally win or else this season. I mean, like I said this on our midway point show. The best thing the Milwaukee Bucks did was re-up Giannis Antetokounmpo for a long-term extension, because I really feel like this Bucks team is actually more vulnerable than they've been the last 2 years. And that's with Drew Holiday, who has been a great addition to the Milwaukee Bucks. But Miami has seen this team before. They're not afraid. They know how to defend Giannis probably better than any team. And the variety of zone defenses that they throw at the Milwaukee Bucks last year that confused the heck out of them, I'm quite sure they have more of that when it came from this time around. So Miami, and then you look at if the Miami Heat can get through Milwaukee, they have the Nets, and like I said, they epitomize Jimmy Butler's mentality. Butler's not afraid of anybody. We've seen that in the bubble during the finals, where he basically played himself into dehydration in a couple of those games to will Miami to a couple of wins in that series against the Lakers. This Heat team look like a team that would love a shot at the Brooklyn Nets and knocking them out before they can get to a conference finals matchup with the 76ers. The question is going to be, they have the defense. Can they get enough scoring and of consistent scoring, because I mentioned Tyler Hero and the Miami Heat worrying about, kind of the second year struggles, but also the, instant celebrity that some young athletes tend to struggle with. And it became very public several weeks ago. But he's kind of toned it down a little bit. He's got back to who he was. And Miami is healthy. That's the most important thing. They're going into the playoffs at their healthiest that they've been all season. And it's going to be a really tough matchup, tough, fun matchup for that Miami's going to present for Milwaukee in this first round. And I feel like they are a big threat to knock the Nets off before Brooklyn gets to the conference finals, because you got to look at this. The Nets have all the talent and firepower, but what's the chemistry? They haven't played enough games together. And we saw what that led to with the Clippers a year ago. And Miami's one of those teams that they get high and streaky. They can exploit those chemistry issues tenfold. So, like I said, they had the short layoff, the injuries, the COVID, but here they are, and they're ready for another Cinderella run.
We are also contractually obligated once every show to bash the Clippers, even if we're not talking about the Clippers. So Anthony we have more coming on that. But let's talk about the team that Anthony kind of besmirched in that little talk, and that's the Milwaukee Bucks. First of all, the Milwaukee Bucks played a very good game, but Miami did not have Jimmy Butler in that game, and Jimmy Butler has probably been an underrated MVP candidate over the last few months. He gives his team a 22-7 every night when healthy, and he also provides the team with big face coffee whenever they need their pick-me-up at any point during the game. Now, moving on to the actual Milwaukee Bucks. Honestly, you mentioned Holiday, and Holiday is the key to this team going forward. Last year in that Miami series, Butler could do almost anything that he wanted to do because of the fact that there was nobody who could come even close to defending him. If you have Giannis come out towards Butler, you have no size. So Holiday is always there to guard the best player on the other team, and I think doing that allows Butler's numbers to go down a little bit. And we still know that Jimmy Butler is not 100%. He missed game time a lot during this season. And again, one of the biggest things of this postseason is injuries. One injury flips every series around. And Milwaukee, as long as their big three stays healthy, they can make a run. Giannis had about the same typical season that he's had in his last two MVP seasons. Except tonight, he's not even one of the three finalists for MVP, because that narrative is just basically do it in the postseason. This team at times wanted to prove that they could be better as a group and sacrificed wins this year. That's why they're the 3 seed after being the number 1 seed for 2 consecutive years. You have a deeper lineup this year. You have Bobby Portis. You have PJ Tucker coming in to be a huge defensive presence for them. I like Milwaukee a lot. I think the Milwaukee-Miami series is going to be a slugfest, but if Giannis doesn't make a leap and get past that Miami wall that he had all during last year's playoffs, Giannis is going to take a hit in a lot of people's eyes. So I do think Milwaukee can win that series. Then Brooklyn would most likely be next. It's kind of funny. Milwaukee is going to have to win a series with defense and then win a series with offense. So they will be ready on both sides of the ball for a possible Eastern Conference Finals matchup with Philadelphia. And in the 3 games that Milwaukee and Philadelphia played this year, although Philadelphia was not healthy in the 2 in Milwaukee, which was in a back-to-back Thursday-Saturday situation, Milwaukee could easily win a 7-game series versus Philadelphia. They need to be considered as the 1A to the 1B and 1C that are the Nets and the Sixers, because a lot of people are sleeping on the Bucks. A lot of people like the Sixers road to get to the Eastern Conference, to get to a NBA Finals. A lot of people like the talent of the Nets, although I think we've all said this before. What has James Harden and what has Kyrie Irving won on his own? The answer, 0. So I think, and again, that's one team that you have to really predict with health. I know we can't talk about health, but health is a big factor in this postseason. as long as that team stays healthy, I think Giannis, Holiday, Middleton, and one of the best benches in the NBA, you know what? They might finally overcome all of the talk about do it in the postseason. They've heard that for 5 months. I think it's time that they do it in the postseason, and this might be the year.
Might be.
Let's move on. All right, on to the West, where the Vegas favorite just qualified for the playoffs 24 hours ago. Welcome to 2021. Yeah, that would be the 7th-seeded Lakers, who are taking on the young, well, outside of banana boat friend Chris Paul, and the Suns, 2nd-seeded in round number 1. And the Lakers are the first ever team in 30 years to be a 7th seed and be a favorite in their opening round matchup. Oh, and don't forget about the top-seeded Utah Jazz, the 3rd-seeded Denver Nuggets, and all-world MVP, most likely MVP Nikola Jokic, and the 5th-seeded Dallas Mavericks, who will take on the sports line's favorite team, and I've even joined the bashing bandwagon in 2021, the 4th-seeded Los Angeles Clippers. Jay, choose your weapon.
Well, I had the number 1 seed in the East. I'm taking the number 1 seed in the West as a team to watch. And has there ever been a West number 1 seed who's been given less respect? Utah has the best record in the NBA at 52-20. And before the West play-in games even started, there were people who were saying that if they were to play the Lakers or the Warriors in the first round, that they could get knocked out and should be underdogs. Look, I know that Donovan Mitchell, their leading scorer at 26-4 a game, has missed the last 16 games, but there's more to this team than just Mitchell. Center Rudy Gobert was an all-star, averaged a double-double, 14 points and 13.5 boards. He was 2nd in the NBA in rebounds per game and 1st in total rebounds. He shot 67.5% from the floor. Granted, he rarely ventured outside the paint, and averaged 2.7 blocks per game, which was 2nd in the NBA. His 190 total blocks were the most in the league. They have a 6th Man of the Year candidate in Jordan Clarkson. He made exactly 1 start, which is the epitome of being a 6th man, and was Utah's 2nd leading scorer at 18-4 a game off the bench. Bojan Bogdanovic, 17 points a game and shot 39% from beyond the arc. Starting point guard Mike Conley had a breakout season with the Jazz, 16.2 points and 6 assists a game. He shot 41% from 3, picked up 1.4 steals, and he mastered Quinn Snyder's intricate offensive system. Though like his backcourt mate Mitchell, he had some injury issues, playing only 51 games overall and missing 9 of the last 12 coming into the playoffs with hamstring tightness. His 2nd stint of missing 6 or more games this season. Utah needs him to be his usual self while Mitchell ramps himself back up. Joe Ingles rounds out the sextet of Jazz players averaging double figures. He was at 12.1 points per game, and he led the team in shooting beyond the arc at 45.1%. The big thing, other than Mitchell's help, that the Jazz need to be concerned with is whether or not they'll be able to play their preferred style of offense during the postseason. Utah led the league in 3-pointers made, 16.7 a game, and attempted 43 per game. Clarkson, Bogdanovic, Mitchell, and Ingles all put up over 400 3-point attempts and all hit at least 178. They also took the fewest mid-range shots in the league this season, 6.2 per game. They generate high-quality shots off screens and ball movement, but how well will that work in a playoff series against a team that can switch on everything on defense? When Utah loses their offensive rhythm, they tend to rely too much on ISO ball from Mitchell to create late in the shot clock. And contrary to what you might believe, that does not really work out well for the Jazz. They went 1-6 in games where Mitchell attempted more than 25 field goals in a game. This is a team that won 39 games by double digits, most in the league by a wide margin. They led the league in net rating, +9, by 3 points per 100 possessions, and were the only team to rank among the top 5 in offense, 116.5, and defense, 107.5 in terms of rating and efficiency. Gobert led the league in overall plus-minus at +728 and led the league by almost 200 points in that category. Utah has the top 4 players in that stat on their roster. And here's another stat for you. And it's one everyone who doubts this team should keep in mind. The Jazz set the NBA record for most threes made per game in a season with those 16.7, but they also allowed a league low 10.9 threes made per game. They're just the 2nd team in NBA history to make the most threes and allow the fewest in a season, joining the 99-2000 Pacers. That team, coached by Larry Bird, no slouch beyond the arc himself, That team finished number 1 in the East and went to the NBA Finals, losing to the Lakers in 6 games. Just saying. This team earned the number 1 seed. Almost wire to wire, the Jazz had the best record in the West. They were able to stay at or near the top of the league for almost 6 weeks without either Mitchell, Connolly, or Clarkson being in their lineup. Connolly and Clarkson look to be 100%. And if Mitchell is healthy by the weekend, he practiced with the team today for the first time since suffering the injury. They are a legit finals contender no matter who they play in any round. Do not sleep on them.
Here's my problem with the Jazz, and I'm going to answer this question straight up. If Golden State gets it as the 8, take the other 7 teams in the league or in the conference. This team, can we say that the NBA is a superstar-driven league? Yes or no?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Come on.
Against any of those other 7 teams, would you say the Jazz would have the best player on the court in the final 5 minutes? Nope.
If Mitchell is healthy, yeah, you can say that.
Phoenix, maybe. Nuggets, it's Jokic. Clippers, it's Kawhi.
Hard to compare a guard versus.
It's hard to compare, but I'm telling you right now, that's the one problem people have with the Jazz. And
but
I
here's
think
the
that's
thing, Rabbi. Here's the thing, okay? This team, if you're going to win the NBA playoffs and get to the finals, yeah, you need a guy who can take over a game because there's going to be points during a game and a series where you need that. But at the end of the day, this team has all the pieces that if you sleep on them, and because nobody jumps out, there's no, big highlight, 72-point marquee type guy on this team, that you don't automatically jump and look at any of these guys and say,
well,
yeah,
Mitchell can be that guy by the way. That's what they may
the
need.
thing is there are these guys, they may not, they're their superstar. There may be games where he does not match up with the other team's superstar, but I'll take the rest of the guys on that starting 5 and Clarkson coming off the bench. You tell me how they match up against other guys, because I'll tell you right now, if they get the Warriors in the first round, sure, Mitchell may lose the head-to-head battle against Steph, but I'll take the rest of those guys against the rest of the Warriors.
Hey, I want you to take it easy on Donovan Mitchell, okay? He's a fellow Met fan like myself, so I'm a little sympathetic towards Donovan Mitchell's cause, okay? I'm just throwing it out there.
Jesus Christ, why do we have to get a Mets thing in there? No hitter, Corey Kluber last time.
Who's Mets, FYI?
Anyway, let's move on.
It's his birthday. He's a lot of Mets reference.
That is true. He has a lot of Mets reference. Again, happy birthday. All right. So for the sake of openness of the show, until 24 hours ago, my pick for this was going to be the Phoenix Suns. I like their team. They had the bubble run last year. They traded for Chris Paul. Devin Booker has probably had just as good of a season as possible. They have a lot of depth with Cameron Payne and Cameron Johnson. However, they have a terrible matchup in the first round because they're playing the defending NBA champions. So I've switched it over and I'm going to pick the Los Angeles Lakers as my pick. It sucks to have to go with the crowd, but never bet against LeBron James. And we saw it last night when he made a wild 3-pointer where only one of his 3 lines of vision was apparently working, if you believe him, and made the last bucket of the game. It turned out to be the last bucket of the game in the instant classic against the Golden State Warriors last night, winning 103-100. Do you realize this team has won their last 6 games going into the postseason, and it started with a win over the Suns. Now the Lakers are 1-2 against the Suns this year, but no combo of LeBron and AD in any of those games. This team is built on defense. They would have been fallen further, as we've mentioned several times. Me and Anthony have talked about it. They have the league's top net rating of 106.8 points allowed per 100 possessions. The entire roster is meant to complement James and Davis. And obviously in the postseason or in the offseason, they did so even though they won the title. Dennis Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell, come on down. Marc Gasol, come on down. Middle of the season, Andre Drummond, come on down. It's amazing. They have all of these centers, and yet last night we saw the real way this team is going to win, and that's by putting Anthony Davis, who had a terrible, I can't say terrible enough with too many R's, first half, and went on to have one of the better second halves that he's had in his postseason career. He plays the 5 about as well as anybody can, and he played it in many clutch situations last night, and I think that might be exactly what'll happen again. Now, just looking at the Suns in a second, you can get James is still a little bit hurt. People can guard him as much as they can. Bridges and Crowder can limit him as much as you can limit the second best player in the history of the NBA. But then you have Anthony Davis. There is no size that the Suns can get to counter Anthony Davis. DeAndre Ayton, maybe. But again, if Davis is a small ball center, Davis is going to go all day off of him offensively. Bridges, Crowder, and Craig give up a ton of size. You might need 900 fouls to deal with Anthony Davis in that 5 spot. And that's one of the reasons why I have to pick the Lakers in this series, because Davis is one of the top 5 players in the game when he's right. And then kind of opens up a little bit on that side of the bracket. The 6-3 matchup is Nuggets-Blazers. The Lakers have had a good history against the Blazers. They always come up clutch against them in the biggest situations. And as much as the Nuggets have Nikola Jokic, they don't have too much else, and they beat a fully healthy Nuggets team at the end of the season. And then come the Jazz, and then again, I say this to you, don't bet against LeBron James in the postseason. You're stupid if you do, and this is why I am hedging my bets in 2021. Anthony, rest of the West.
Hey, look, what the Paulie tell Rocky in the third Rocky movie? Hit the one in the middle. LeBron James hit that advice very well, even with his Super Bowl. You saw that last night. Look, the Western Conference is deep. That's just long story short. It's been deep all season long. You look at the number 3 seed. Deep. Yeah, the number 3 seed Denver Nuggets. They're led by the possible MVP and Jokic. The question is do he have enough help? Because obviously, no Jamal Murray. He lost Will Barton for a good stretch this season. They definitely would need some kind of help. They traded for Aaron Gordon. Michael Porter Jr. has been kind of inconsistent. Has been that second scorer. So they have a lot of questions, despite the fact that Jokic himself could probably will them to a conference finals appearance. But we just see. Obviously, you talked about the Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. The Suns obviously being in the top 10 in both offense and defensive efficiency. But as you mentioned, Rabbi, they got a really bad matchup, and I feel bad for the Suns because you worked so hard for the number 2 seed. You was literally pushing for the 1 spot, and you get the one matchup that doesn't favor you whatsoever because of the pace among the slowest in the NBA. The Knicks are actually the slowest, second by the Phoenix Suns as far as pacing per game. And then you have the fact that they're inexperienced. You know, Chris Paul and Jay Crowder are the only 2 guys who have actually played postseason games on that roster, so that could come back to bite them on the rear end. Then you go to our favorite whipping team, the Clippers, who, for whatever reason, decided to tank the last 2 games and to fall into a more favorable matchup first round against the Dallas Mavericks. FYI, they didn't just avoid the Lakers in round 1. They avoided a possible Laker matchup in round 2 since the 2-7-3-6 matchups on the same side of the bracket. Also, they avoided, for whatever reason, the Portland Trail Blazers, who they've actually played pretty well against. But maybe the flashbacks of Damian Lillard and Cancun taunts may have scared them away from that. Imagine if you're Patrick Beverly and the last thing y'all go through is Damian Lillard packing up ass at Cancun this season. But look, the Clippers have the talent. They're the same team from a year ago. What did this is a Rajon Rondo and Serge Ibaka? You would think with those championship experiences, that would be enough to kind of get them over the hump. But we've seen in stretch of the season, the Clippers, when they're on, they can be one of the best teams in the league. They're the top 3-point shooting team in the league for a reason. And then we see moments like getting beat by 51 to the Dallas Mavericks, getting beat around by the Knicks, even though the score was a lot closer. Physically they were physically dominated by the Knicks on national television. And then this is the same team that complained about chemistry a year ago, decided to sit 8 guys and lose to the 2 worst teams in the league in the final stretch of the season. So the Clippers have really, because of that, put a huge bullseye on the back that was a lot bigger than a year ago, where they had the championship expectations. Maybe Ty Lue is a difference maker, but if not, I can't see a situation where this team is together outside of Paul George next season. It's going down to, and then we get to that full-time matchup with the Dallas Mavericks. It's all about health, because we know Luka Doncic is going to get his points. Can Kristaps Porzingis stay healthy in this series? I really felt like the full-time matchup a year ago kind of changed when Porzingis went down with that injury and was lost for the rest of the series. And I have to mention this because the 8th seed has not been decided yet. Memphis and Golden State. Memphis led by John Morant, and obviously the sting of losing that playing game to the Portland Trail Blazers last year in the bubble still sticks with Memphis. And Valanciunas put on a hell of a performance the other night too, by the way, 2020 performance, but he can't play long. He can't play more than 35 minutes at a time. And Rabbi, you mentioned that the other day. Like, he looked gassed by the end of that game against San Antonio. So you gotta wonder, if he's on the court, who's going to get the rebounding? Who's going to help out? Because that's one of the main weaknesses to Memphis when he's on the court. And Golden State, they just don't have the depth in their rotation right now. They're missing a lot of guys. And we saw last night that Steph Curry is playing just absolutely lights out. But this is still a young team, and they let a game that's like to slip away because the pressure got to them. They started turning the ball over a lot in the second half. And when they need Andrew Wiggins, he's got to carry that performance that he had against the Lakers over. He had a great game. Really took it to LeBron James. They're going to need that as well in the playing game. So the Western Conference as a whole is open because every team, you can kind of see them going on a run, but every team also have questions. Like the Lakers, they're a heavy favorite, but it's the health. Are they healthy? Have they played enough games to get on the same page? And Andre Drummond really looks like a paint clogger when him and Anthony Davis are on the court at the same time. I even suggested that they should go back with Marcus Gasol as a starter because he should get some more floor space and a guy who can shoot from outside. Whereas Drummond really isn't much outside of 15 feet offensively. So the Western Conference is going to be fun to watch. Some great first-round matchups. But again, every team has a flaw, which makes it even more compelling. And it's just a matter of which team can overcome that flaw and get to the finish line.
It's very interesting. And quickly, I'll mention the 5 and 6 seeds too. You talked about Luka. I think he's ready for a big-time performance last year against the Clippers.
The Blazers too.
And you left off the Blazers. Yeah, you never go against Damian Lillard in a postseason series. That's a very favorable matchup against Denver. And we've seen Lillard magic before. And
but the Portland's bench is a bit of a concern too. Outside
and their defense and their lack of defense is also a huge concern. Okay. Let's circle the drain to one of the best drains out there, Uniondale, Long Island. Let's go to Uniondale. Words that will thankfully never be said again after 2021. New York Islanders are the team that they've beaten 4 out of the last 5 series in their playoff history. The Pittsburgh Penguins are meeting yet again in round 1. The Islanders split the 2 games in the Mellon Bank, or whatever the hell that they're calling that trash arena now. I didn't even look and see what they did in Pittsburgh. Is it PNC? It's something in there. Isles won that game 1, 4-3 in OT. Pens won in game 2, 2-1. And in the game that just finished in what was a wild third period, the Pens took home ice advantage back, winning 5-4. Let's get some keys for at least a game 4 in game 5. Back to Anthony.
Rabbi, before Anthony jumps in, you were so totally not even close. It's PPG Paints Arena.
It's PPG.
Okay.
I don't care. It's Pittsburgh's arena. It's a shithole. Pittsburgh always plays the Pittsburgh Penguins always play in a shithole. They have great fans, but it's not. No. Okay, move on.
Yeah, for me, it's been about momentum and pacing because the Islanders for the first 2 games, for the most part, have been able to play their style. They want to muck things up. They are physical. They are a defensive team for a reason. They only allow 2.23 goals a game, and you have not one but two really good goaltenders to choose from. So you kind of want to slow the game down, whereas Pittsburgh wants to play more on the open ice. And for the most part, the first two games, the Islanders were playing their game. I had the hit total here. I actually wrote it down. The hit total in game one, 72-47 in favor of the Islanders in a game that won. And a high scoring game for their standards because they do struggle offensively. And in game two, it was a 46-37 advantage as far as hits. The Islanders really trying to make this into a physical game because that's their style. That's really the only way they're going to beat the Penguins because they just do not have enough firepower offensively with no Anders Lee. And by the way, Matt Barzal got his first point tonight. He was pretty much MIA in the first two games. I mentioned that they needed to get something out of him to at least be somewhat aggressive if the Islanders want any shot offensively because scoring goals is going to be a problem. Now you get to tonight, and another thing with the Islanders is that they have started out very slow. They fell behind early in all three games in this series so far. And for much of the game, the first two periods of game three was pretty much the Penguin style. They were being able to get into the attack zone unimpeded. They were able to get through the forechecking of the Islanders, which has been so great the first two games. And they were able to get pepper some shots on net. And they had a 3-1 lead going into the third period. And then the third period turned into a scene from Slapshot. All hell broke loose. And you had 11 guys total in the penalty box. And that allowed the Islanders to actually get back into the game with 2 goals to tie the game. And then it just went back and forth from that point on. But we saw in the third period the difference between the two teams. Because when the Islanders can actually get the Penguins into that I call it a goonish style of game where it seems like every 5 minutes there's a tussle or some pushing and shoving going on. That's what the Islanders want. That's what Barry Trotz and company does best. However, when the Penguins go back and start to remember, hey, wait a minute, when the Penguins, we have the offensive firepower, we have all these weapons, we have the Crosbys, a healthy Malkin back in the lineup, the Carters of the world, we can pretty much go and do as we want and score at will. And that's what we saw in the third period. And the Islanders are going to have to figure something out because right now, they have to do something at net because Romanov has not been good the last couple of games. He's given up some pretty cheap, soft goals that he wish he could have back. And the Islanders are going to have to get their defense together. But it's great to get them into some kind of confrontation and fighting. But look, the Islanders are going to have to figure out a way to do that and stay disciplined in a way too because they're giving up way too many opportunities for the Pens. If they get in the open ice, it's pretty much all she wrote.
I think it's kind of funny how we've been so programmed to this Penguins team choking from 2018 to 2020 after their back-to-back Stanley Cup runs that we don't realize that they're still one of the best organizations in hockey. And all of a sudden they're putting everything together now and they're really having a big time run. Jay, what about you?
I'm looking at this series from the Penguins angle. Since I've been responsible for opponent watch the entire show, why should hockey be any different? You know what, though? What really stood out for me before tonight's game was how Pittsburgh played in the final 20 minutes of game 2, which was a must-win situation for them. They led 2-1 coming into the third period, and conventional hockey wisdom, especially in the Stanley Cup playoffs, dictates that the team with the lead sits back and hangs on to that position of being up. Instead, the Penguins did what they do best, dictating tempo, forcing play time and time again throughout the final 20 minutes of play. It was a clinic of forechecking and attacking on offense to preserve a lead. They outshot the Islanders 16-10 in the final period while holding on to that 2-1 lead. It was very much the Penguins doing what they do. The Islanders barely got any looks in the third period, let alone good looks. And those 10 shots on goal were about as low stress as it gets. Those final 20 minutes were key for the Penguins in terms of mental toughness after what was a very shaky showing in overtime in the Game 1 loss. And they showed they had the fortitude to close out this must-win game. If the Penguins play like that throughout the playoffs, they're going to be a very difficult opponent for anyone. The big question was, would they be able to maintain that level of play going forward, especially tonight with the series shifting to Long Island, where they traditionally have not played well. Tonight they were able to. The other thing that stood out to me was the 180-degree difference in play and goal by Tristan Jarry from game 1 to game 2. He stopped 37 of 38 shots in the game 2 win, 16 of those while protecting that 1-goal lead in the final period in the pressure cooker of and now I know I'm beating the term to death, a must-win game. 48 hours after he looked very pedestrian in that game 1 loss where he allowed 4 goals on his glove side. The big question was, could he carry that over to games on the island as his home road splits were pretty glaring in favor of home ice. At home this season, he was 21-16-3 with a 2.35 goals against average and a 9.26 save percentage. On the road, he was 18-9-6 with a 3.25 goals against average and an 8.85 save percentage. Which Tristan Jarry shows up at the Coliseum would be a huge factor in where this series, will be when it returns to Pittsburgh for Game 5. Safe to say the Penguins don't want to see the version of Jarry we saw in Game 3 tonight, despite how things turned out. Obviously, Penguins still need to get Sidney Crosby untracked. He only has 1 point through the first 3 games. But they are ecstatic to have Evgeny Malkin back on the ice. He had 2 assists tonight. But with the solid play up front from the likes of Jake Gunsel, Brian Rust, Jared McCann, and Jeff Carter, who scored the 2nd and 4th Penguin goals tonight, his 2nd and 3rd of the series. This guy has 14 goals since he came over from the Kings at the trade deadline. And the number 1 defensive pairing of Chris Letang, who scored the Pens' first goal tonight and assisted on their 5th, and Brian Dumoulin, they have to like where they're at against an Islander team that looks to be on their game so far this series, despite what happened tonight. We all know how pivotal Game 3 is when a series is tied 1-1, and this one did not disappoint. The third period alone, as Anthony said, was about as crazy as a Stanley Cup playoff hockey game can get. Back-to-back sequences in the first 7 minutes of that period, where all 10 players on the ice were sent to the penalty box for fighting around the Penguins' net. The Isles somehow got a power play out of it, scored 18 seconds into it to tie the game at 3. And then there was another scrum that put 6 Islanders in the penalty box, 4 Penguins in the box, Pittsburgh on the power play. They scored 37 seconds into that to go back up 4-3. Craziest stretch of play I've ever seen in a hockey game. Islanders eventually tied the game up again at 4:5:43 left in the game. Barely had they have time to finish the celebration when Alex Tanev, who's a fourth line forward for the Pens, batted an airborne puck past Varlamov with 3:36 left to put the Pens back up by 1 goal at 5-4. That turned out to be the final score. Gave the Pens a 2-1 series lead. And this is what you're supposed to do. You got to steal one on the other team's home ice. Both teams have done that. Momentum now shifts back to the Pens. Islanders are behind the 8 ball. They need to tie this on Game 4, or they go back to Pittsburgh 1 game away from elimination.
Would you say Game 4 is a must-win game? Take a shot?
For the Islanders, yes, it is.
Of course it is. And one thing that I'm looking for, and I'm going to just make this short because I want to get into our last segment, is I remember in 2016 when the first series finale of the Nassau Coliseum came, they played really well in the Game 4 game against Washington, but ended up losing in Game 6 to close out the Coliseum, or so we thought. And I hope to God, for the Islanders' sake, that they can kind of get that momentum back in big-time Game 4. I know that's not a big crowd out there. It's not going to be the full capacity crowd that the Nassau Coliseum deserves.
They're loud.
Yes.
And it sounded
really
like
loud,
tonight, that's for sure.
It sounds like it. So I hope that they could get that momentum and will that team back in series. Got 2 really good crowds in this series, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens in Game 4. I think there's a lot of intangibles in there. This is the best the Islanders have played in about a month, but they still are playing a much better offensive team. Sometimes we know how the coaching of Barry Trotz has helped out the Islanders in the past. Sometimes, though, you got to look at the talent there. And right now, the talent lies in Pittsburgh's hands.
Yeah, and Rabbi, if you had told any of us tonight that the Penguins would put 5 goals up on the Islanders and Sidney Crosby would not be involved in any of them in any shape, manner, or form, we would have told you were crazy. But that's what happened tonight. That shows you the depth.
They're deep.
The quality.
They're deep attack.
of the Penguins offense.
It's really shocking to say, as I said at last week's show, the Pittsburgh Penguins are a surprise as a 1 seed because teams like Washington and Boston should have been much better than them, and they were. And they're going to give the Islanders hell, and that East is just a dogfight, guys. Just a dogfight. Yep. Let's move on to our final segment. The NHL playoffs have had about about a million different formats in the last few years, but we're back to intra-division this year with one division, the Canadian North, just starting their series yesterday. Thanks, Calgary. Thanks, Vancouver. What other of the 7 matchups has caught your eye in the first few days of the postseason? Anthony, we've done a lot of tropes tonight on this show. Let's get another one out of the way. Anthony, let's talk about Vegas.
Yeah, my attention has been on the Minnesota Wild and Vegas Golden Knights series.
I'm shocked.
Yeah, I know.
Going with the Knights? Right? When we're talking Stanley Cup playoffs? Rabbi, how shocked is this development?
I'm almost on the floor right now.
Yeah, they've only been my home team away from home at this point. But look, the what stand out to me in this series has been the goaltending. I mean, the first 2 games, Cam Talbot and Marc-Andre Fleury has been about as good as it gets as far as goaltending. Andre Fleury has stopped 63 or 65 shots in the first 2 games. One of them just happened to be a game winner in the first game in overtime, and he only allowed 1 goal in the second game. He's been spectacular. Talbot has been just as good. He had the shutout victory in game 1. And pretty much kept Minnesota in the game in game 2. But Max Pacioretty's absence for Vegas has been obviously noticeable. He was a scratch for tonight, third game in series. He's missed the final 6 of the regular season as well. And the Knights offense has struggled as well. Obviously, Stone just cut they're playing right now as a speed. They cut the Minnesota Wild lead to 2-1. Halfway through the second period, but the Golden Knights offense has struggled with him not in the lineup, and it showed in the first 2 games. And don't let the third goal fool you. That was a garbage goal that they were able to get at the end of game 2. Minnesota, their persistence and their confidence is what stands out to me as well. They are a defensive-minded team. They literally the opposite of their team nickname, as they play about as boring as hockey as it gets. Only the Islanders will push you to sleep outside of Minnesota, but you know what? They're more physical. They've actually owned the Golden Knights as far as head-to-head matchups in the last few years and won the regular season matchup 5-3 this season and was able to get 1 game from Vegas and going back to Minnesota confidently, where the Golden Knights have not historically played well at all. They've been peppering Andre Fleury with shots the first 2 games. The first period, they feel like they finally figured him out, got 2 goals past him. It should be, like I said, this is the one series I'm looking at in that conference, in that division, that's going to be more of a back and forth as much as anything, because these 2 teams really match up very well. And also the fact that Vegas kind of got the short end of the stick. I mean, Minnesota would have been a division winner anywhere else except the same division where you have the Golden Knights and the Avalanche right in front of you. So, like I said, right now it's kind of a toss-up in this series. Tie 1-1. Minnesota is currently leading game 3 as we speak, but it's gonna come down to the goaltending again. Like nothing gets you to a Stanley Cup run than a hot goaltender at the right time, and Andre Fleury has played very well. But Talbot, there's a reason why a lot of Ranger fans were kind of not happy when he was traded so long ago, because they saw him as an heir apparent to Henrik Lundqvist, and it took a couple years for the Rangers to kind of find 2 more young goalies to kind of fill that void. So right now it should be this is a series I think is going to go at least 6 or 7 games at most.
Yeah, it's amazing how Talbot has been kind of a journeyman in his career, and this is by far his best stop of his entire career. He's been a Vezina Trophy candidate. Canada, Jay.
Oh, Canada.
Stop. It was just a seg.
Sorry. Couldn't resist. I'm looking at the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs. They are meeting in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the first time since 1979. It will be the 15th time the two oldest teams in the NHL have met in the postseason, adding another chapter to the most intense hockey rivalry north of the border. Maple Leaf center Austin Matthews put it best. Here's the quote. It's kind of like Red Sox Yankees, two fan bases and organizations with rich histories in this league over the last 100+ years, so it's pretty incredible. The Leafs were 7-2-1 against Les Habitants this year in the regular season, averaging 3.4 goals per game and giving up an average of 2.5. The health of each team is going to be a key factor. Start with Montreal, where goalie Carey Price missed 19 of the final 21 regular season games with a concussion suffered on April 19 against the Edmonton Oilers, along with defenseman Shea Weber, who missed the final 8 games of the season with an upper body injury. Price and Weber, along with forwards Brendan Gallagher and Philip Deneau, returning to the Canadiens lineup will be big for Montreal. Gallagher missed the final 21 games of the regular season with a broken thumb, and Weber, the Montreal captain, sustained an upper body injury on April 18th and didn't play the rest of the regular season, as I noted. Defenseman Zach Bogosian and forward Zach Hyman returned for the Maple Leafs, and that's big for them. Bogosian missed the final 10 games with a shoulder injury on April 20th. Hyman missed 11 games after sustaining a knee injury on April 18. Another key factor will be the reconstitution of each team's number one line as players return from injury. Hyman's return for Toronto puts the Leafs' number one line back together, as he'll once again skate alongside Austin Matthews, who had 40 goals in 50 games, and Mitch Marner, who averaged 1.24 points per game, which made them one of the NHL's best lines. In 35 games this season, the trio had a 64.9 expected goals percentage. Their offense was the Leafs' best defense, as Toronto goalies had a .932 save percentage when that line was on the ice. If Gallagher and Deneau are both able to return tonight, they'll skate alongside Thomas Tatar on the Habs' number one line. That line had a nice 69% expected goal percentage with some outstanding underlying defensive numbers. It can't be stressed enough how important Gallagher is to this team. They were 17-9-9 with him, 7-11-0 without him. As usual, and as Anthony noted in his segment, as usual for the Stanley Cup playoffs, the goalie situation will be key for each team. For Montreal, we all know what Price can do when he's on his game, and with his playoff experience, he'll be given every chance to show that he can do it again. The question for the Habs is which Carey Price will they get? The mediocre Price in name only that they saw too much of in the regular season, or the goalie who posted a .936 save percentage and 2 shutouts in the bubble last postseason? In game 1, it was the latter, as he stopped 33 of 34 shots. Jack Campbell has been Toronto's number one goalie for the better part of the second half of the season, starting most of the games since March 20. He was 17-3-2 with a .215 goals against and a .921 save percentage with 2 shutouts in his 22 starts. And even though Frederik Andersen is back from injury, Campbell got the start in game 1. As you guys know, I always look at special teams for the playoffs. Maple Leafs had the 16th best power play in the NHL at 20.3%. And the 24th best penalty kill at only 77.7%. They're first in expected goals on the power play, though, at 7.99 per 60 minutes. The Canadiens have the 19th best power play at 19.3% and the 18th best penalty kill at 79.3. It's pretty much a wash, as they are the number one, as these are the matchups. Neither team was able to do anything along with the man advantage in game 1 tonight. Habs went 0 for 5, Leafs went 0 for 4. On paper, this is a series that the Leafs should win handily, but with the history of this rivalry and the, quote, anything can happen dynamic at the Stanley Cup playoffs, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if the Canadiens gave the Leafs all they can handle, which they did in game 1. And coming out of game 1, we have a new storyline that's going to bear watching going forward in this series, and that's the health of Leafs captain John Tavares, who was taken off the ice tonight on a stretcher with 9:31 left in the first period after being checked by Canadian defenseman Ben Sherratt and then hit in the face by the knee of Canadian forward Corey Perry. He was unable to get up and was on the ice for 10 minutes before being taken off. Tavares had 50 points this year, 19 goals and 31 assists, and was expected to be a major factor in this series for Toronto, who lost the season opener 2-1.
So I'm going to finish it off today by taking our plane back to America and going to Florida, our home and native cluster F. Our home and native cluster F, as we talk about the series between the Lightning and the Panthers, who have met exactly 0 times until this matchup right here. We remember earlier in the year when we thought that the Lightning were almost a stone cold lock to win their division. Guess what? They didn't even finish second in their division. This is a 2-3 matchup. Carolina, those bunch of jerks, are currently handling Nashville in their first round series, and they're going to prove to be a damn good contender for the Stanley Cup. Now, earlier, you might have seen me pumping my fist. That's because Florida won game 3 of this series in overtime, 6-5. They another goalie slugfest, and they won. Tampa Bay won the first game of this series 5-4. And the second game of this series 3-1. This is not a series, though, that has been exactly like that. Both teams have played hard. Both teams have just been showing target practice. The Lightning have just had contributions from everyone. Nikita Kucherov made his season debut. He seems to have those timely returns in the postseason. And speaking of, Steven Stamkos also returned in this game from injury. And the Panthers have just played really tough in this series. Now, Andre Vasilevsky, especially in that game 2, had some amazing saves against Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau, but the depth is where the Lightning have had the advantage. However, one thing that I have to mention about this series is, as much as we mentioned that Florida doesn't really care about any of the COVID restrictions that they have, and their governor almost puts people in jail for wearing masks, they have had 10,000 in the first 2 games that were played in the Sunshine Center, a place that had almost never embraced hockey until now, and another 9,000 tonight in the Amalie Arena. These games have been so loud that even Commissioner Gary Bettman, everyone's third favorite commissioner in the 4 major sports, had mentioned how I couldn't even hear. This building is either very loud or I'm losing my hearing, he had said earlier tonight. Spoiler alert, Gary, it's a little bit of both. Meanwhile, I would have to say this is going to be a still back and forth series. We kind of bashed Florida Panthers goalie Sergei Bobrovsky last year in this show, and he had his second worst season since his 23-year-old rookie season. He's had just no success. He was actually benched tonight, and it wasn't too much of a success, but again, the Panthers did come up on top. This series has been as close as any series has been in the Stanley Cup playoffs so far, outside of Boston, Washington. I can't believe we didn't mention that, and especially them going to 2 OTs last night. But I'm really excited to see what the Lightning and Panthers can bring for an encore for now, what will be at least a game 4 and game 5. Oh, I guess that means we're done. Anyway, this playoffs edition of On the Sports Lines has finished. For Jay Kaplan and the birthday boy, Anthony Strait, I am the ringmaster of this circus. Anthony, you already got the cake, it seems like, on Instagram like an hour ago, so I can't give that to you again. But my name has been Stephen Rabinowitz. We go live every week at facebook.com/onthesportslines, and we build the nice little archive for this show at youtube.com/onthesportslines. And OJ.
ONTH Sportslines with the @ in front of it is our Twitter handle. You'll find links to this show and assorted other commentary on sports.
That you can or cannot choose to read. We wish you would, but you can always just ignore it and go into other slots too. Anyway, for all of us on the Sports Lines, we'll be back next week. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.